Welcome back, everyone, to Tout Bright, the best way to learn how to negotiate your salary, pay raises, and promotions. Today, I have an amazing person, Divya Parekh. She has authored, I think, over 10 different books. Is that correct? Yeah,
Yep.
and she is a host of her own show, Beyond Confidence, which is amazing. I had the pleasure of going through several episodes. Um, and welcome to the show.
Well, thank you for having me. It's a pleasure being here.
Amazing. So what's the most exciting thing that happened to you last week?
Ooh, the most exciting thing that happened to me last week. So here's what I'm going to share with you. I was walking by the sound side of ocean in Long Island, New York. I was in New York last week. And surprisingly, there were these wonderful cormorants. And I don't know if you've ever heard of cormorants, they can go underwater quite for a long time and they're very playful. I love ocean, I love nature. And then it's probably in the same area, they're like fish or whatever. And there were a couple of egrets, white egrets. The cormorant goes in and he or she is going for fish. And then there are these couple of egrets. The cormorant, just surfaces out of water. And as soon as he's surfacing out of water, he's got his mouth full. And then the egrets went after him. And you could hear, the cormorant, you could see he was mad, but he couldn't open his mouth. So he was smart. So he didn't open his mouth like squawking or anything like that. And then the fish would have fallen out, but he just flew away. So that was so interesting, just kind of sitting there, having that chance to observe and see. So basically he negotiated by keeping his mouth shut, so to speak.
Wow, that's fascinating. Um, so I always like to start at your first corporate job, right? Whether it's right out of college or a few years in, um, and your experience with um, the hiring process and whether or not you felt comfortable negotiating that first salary.
So I have had several jobs, of course. And so here's what I'll tell you without giving the specifics because people are involved. So here's what happened. For one of my first jobs, I had really solid grades and you're just kind of getting out of college and the expectations, whoever was going to hire and kind of just, I knew them beforehand. It was for a job in a university. And so the chances looked really good. And then I heard from someone that, hey, there is somebody's vice chancellor's son is also blind. And then there were a couple of other candidates who had a really, really high possibilities of getting hired. And of course, on paper, it's, as you know, that there's going to be no discrimination, nothing, but the grade point can be pretty solid. So you're right out of college and you're thinking, what are my odds? I don't have the experience. These other folks have the experience. It's possible that people who are hiring may be swayed because of their connections with these candidates' parents or whatever it is, or their standing, or there are multiple things going on. And at that point in time, when you're barely out of college, in your just 2021, I don't remember exactly, you don't think about things. And so just kind of sat down, and I don't know how this happened. It's just kind of sitting down and thinking, okay, I'm going to go and apply. What's the worst thing that could happen? And the worst thing could be I wouldn't get a job. All right, so I don't get a job. So what? Now, what could I do? And as the Pareto's law says, right, any part of success is 80% preparation, 20% implementation. Similarly, if you take a look in the corporate world, 80% of the work is done by 20% of people. Similarly, if you bring it down to your own productivity, 20% of your activities move the dial. So I just kind of sat down and I thought, like, you know what, I'm going to prepare. I decided to go ahead and move in the similar circles where the people were either showing up, basically showing up, that what did I have? So whether it was for speaking or whichever way, so finding champions. And there was just doing the preparation that as to what could I do, as to what is the perception out there. Of course, at that time, social media wasn't there, but like networking, where those people are hanging out, how you're showing up, how you're appearing, and just playing full out. Did that, went through, I did my preparation, whatever I could, made sure that I had gone through my questions, and we'll, of course, we'll get into the details of negotiation. And this is just based on whatever I had learned during my graduate program. And because that's the beauty of doing science. So there's a hypothesis, and now you create an experiment to see, most likely, whether it's right or wrong. You never go into science thinking that this is going to be a certain output. You can predict it, but there's no guarantee that it's going to happen. So that mindset really helped me, that training over the course of years. Okay, let's go. So showed up, played full out. And then surprisingly, I did get the job. So once the job, like once I was hired, I just kind of asked that, what was it that tilted the decision in my favor? So one of the things was that I had really vested. I showed that how much of that job mattered. I showed my engagement, and I also showed that I was willing to do what it takes, go that extra mile to get that, versus the other candidates did not show. So there are little things, but it's interesting how somebody that I know has shared that little hinges swing big doors.
Wow, that's incredible. So you had a career in research, is that correct? Before you,
Yes. Initially, I
okay.
started out, it was in research, and then I was in a university teaching while I was doing my PhD. So it was like, multiple things going around.
Okay. And
And
then
yeah, that
after that, did you
research,
work for corporate as well for research, or did you stay in?
yes.
Okay.
So I
Now,
did work
what,
for corporate.
go ahead.
No, go ahead.
Okay. So I was going to say, like, for those kind of research positions, I know that sometimes they're really well paid depending on the type of research. But I also know that because it's such a unique position that these researchers are in, that it's usually, there's no ladders to climb, or areas that you could like grow into. So I'm just curious about how they kind of negotiated their salary, or the structure within the research department, if there is any.
So here's what I'll share is that it's very important as to when you're talking about negotiation, is that you are prepared as to what is the best outcome you want. What is the worst outcome that can happen, and what are you willing to accept? So, for example, what is non-negotiable? Think about it. What is non-negotiable for you? Where are the areas that you can compromise on? So, for example, in one of my recent jobs, as the salary was being negotiated, it was a temp to permanent job. The idea was that I would start out on a lower salary. But there was a full possibility and track that if I prove prove to myself, then I would get promoted. So it's again, are you just kind of looking at salary? Are you looking at benefits? Are you looking for unlimited vacation? So knowing what is it that you want is so critical and important before you're negotiating. Because so many times what happens is that you can walk away with a great salary, but then you miss out on a multiple areas of benefits. So in my case, it was more towards that, I wanted to secure a permanent track because it came with multiple benefits. So that's the path I chose to go.
Very cool. So could you give us an example of a negotiation that didn't go so great that you've had over the years?
Yes, definitely. So this is again, like probably after my second uh, graduation, I had done that and I was just looking for a job. And I talked with, a lot of different other students, like, hey, you know what, you got into job, what you're making as a starting salary, what's your career trajectory and all that. And I found out that, a few of them had got really, really good salaries. And then when I was there, the hiring manager was like, "They take it or leave it." So sometimes that can happen, that when it's again, always remember, it's a supply and demand situation. So as we talk about market economy, when you're looking at market economy, then these kind of things play out. Sometimes it's a seller's market, sometimes it's a buyer's market. So when I'm saying a seller's market, it may be employer's market, sometimes it may be employee market. So for now, the great resignation is happening. It's becoming harder and harder for employers to attract the right talent. Not only attract the right talent, but also to retain them, sustain them. So there is a balance, there's a swing between where there is more leaning towards, like, where the market is leaning heavily towards. So during that time, of course, it was an employer's market. The state was also not naming any states. That was also pro-employer. And now when that happens, it was just like, okay, there was no negotiation tactics I could have used because they had just set their mind on it. This is the salary. This is, what, we would love to hire you, but this is where we stand. And then I went home, thought it over, and decided not to take it.
Interesting. Yeah, I think that perspective is great because you could try everything under the sun, but if they have their mind set on one thing, there's nothing really you could do to persuade them that's in line. That's fascinating.
Absolutely.
So what
Yeah,
about
and
another example that you have where you felt that you negotiated and you did well?
absolutely. So, Rafi, one of the things that I want to share is that it's so important to be mindful. It's so important to be aware of the situation as to, let's go back to preparation. And I'll share with you my experience that, okay, so I was very fortunate. One of my advisors had sat down and helped us out as to how we could negotiate, how things could happen. So this was with a really decent company, and we knew that the benefits were good and all that. And we kind of knew the range, as they put it out, sort of a range. So now it was the level that they were hiring was lower than what I was qualified for. So here I am, and we're negotiating over salary. And as I had already kind of thought about that, okay, this is the level, this is the salary going to go. And then even if, if I put in hard work for a couple of years, then what's going to happen is that, yes, you can get increase in your compensation, but it would take longer. So what I decided was that rather than haggle over the number, the economics, was to see how I could land onto the higher end of the salary with the next level. So this is again, as we had touched upon initially, I just want to share is that before you kind of go and like think about it, what's the best do you want? What's the worst that could happen that you could be okay with? That okay, you know what? If they don't give me the next level, but if they give me a higher salary, then it's good because then when I'm moving forward, or if there's a next level of change, let's say from E1 to E2 or whatever levels there are in different companies, then I'll definitely be on the higher end of the salary. So kind of like I had my options in my hand. And as we sat down after 2 to 3 rounds of interviewing, the last interview, they gave me an offer. And of course, it was at a lower end. So we went back and I negotiated about moving into a next level. So let's say if it is E6, that, hire me at level E7. And when you get hired at E7, so even though the salary is not high, but it is at the higher level of E6 salary, if that makes sense. So let's say if it's E6 is between 40 to 50. Now, if you get hired for E7, it is from 50 to 60. Just if we kind of go around having the numbers. So we negotiated it, they did not have to change the salary. And because they did not have to change the salary, they gave me the next level. And for me to progress without getting promoted was easier if I demonstrated more than excellence or more than average. So these are like some of the things, as we are thinking about, as you go about negotiating, look at all different angles. What is it that you want? And I wanted certain number of vacations. I got a few extra days. So I walked away very happy, actually.
Oh, that's awesome. So you mentioned your advisor, but who was your primary person, or if you had multiple, that you went to for advice and talking about negotiations growing up?
So here's what I'll say that, there were like a lot of professors and a lot of friends who had been in jobs. So for example, especially when you're in a research lab, you build relationships, especially when you're hanging out at night, running science experiments. You have, we used to do some DNA. Oh gosh, we would run like these big gels, oh, long time back, huge gels. And then you're sitting down, you get these x-ray, and then you're looking at and you're counting, okay, this is you're looking at the DNA sequence, not going into all the details. You're spending nights together, the people become family. And there were quite a few folks who had been ahead of me, and then they got hired, they got their practical experience, and then they passed it on to me.
Oh, that's wonderful. What are some of the worst advice that you got and found out, or I should say less worse advice, but you tried it and it just didn't work? You know, like you didn't realize the market had changed or the situation wasn't the same, and you just went for it because they're like, oh, they said it was working for them, and you're like, oh, whoop.
Well, one I will tell you is sticking to your guns, that do not budge. If this is what you want, just stick to it and hold on to your ground and just stand fast. So when you're talking about like, oh yeah, I'm being very, very strong and I'm being firm. So one of the things I want to share is that adaptability is such a key, because that was like one of the biggest pitfalls in one of my, I was in a job and I was negotiating like a transfer or transition into another department, and it didn't happen because it was just one silly thing. I'm like, no, these are my list of expectations, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, without thinking of the other person. And I want it. And they're like, fine, you wanted all of this, bye-bye. Bye-bye to the opportunity. So
Wow. Yeah, yeah, I know there's people just tout anything, and just because it's there's good rules, but they don't apply in a lot of situations, and I think adaptability is great. Um, So now you're kind of transition out of your corporate career, and so you're doing a different. Now, do you have employees underneath you? Yeah.
So I work with several independent contractors. Gig
Okay.
economy. I'm not sure if you've heard of that or not, but
Yes.
that's where this is again, as you talked about, knowing what type of economy is going, what is more prevalent. So everything is gig economy. And surprisingly, it doesn't have to be. This is again negotiations. You don't have to hire somebody full time for them to be loyal to you, for them to be your family, for them to have your back. It again, so I'll share like one person that has been with me as I transition out. So I started coaching around 2010, and I worked with thousands of people. And one person, the gentleman who did my Daniel, like my website, phenomenal guy. He, we are just partners in this together. I don't work for him. He doesn't work for me. We just work together. That's how I see it. And you'll be surprised anytime anything goes wrong with my website or I have a question, I just send it to him and I get the response this fast. I mean, literally. I mean, I shouldn't say that it's at a at the snap of fingers, but it's super fast. So it's about building those relationships. It's not about thinking, this is your employee or this is your independent contractor. It's about being grateful, being graceful that this person, and I'm not saying, folks, that you're not an expert, you're not an influencer. I'm not saying that you don't have all the capabilities. You cannot be the best version of yourself. Yes, you can, but think about it. You becoming the best version of yourself depends on so many other people. And I will say that I being the best version of myself is because of huge, huge, I would say that so much credibility and credence and credit and everything goes to my team and my family, because without them, I would not be anywhere. And they do say that you are the sum or the average of people that you surround with. So we are a family and we support each other. We got each other's back. So it's having that solid foundation as a home. So many times what will happen is, let's say, now you may say that, hey, you know what, if it's a gig economy, so then what if that person is not available? I want to like go back to a story, even in the corporate world. So many times what would happen is that I'd get the work done and a lot of people would not have the work done. So it was about the relationship. It was not that, oh, you are somebody's boss or, you just tell somebody. These are people. People buy from people. And when I say people buy from people, is that when you have that like, no trust factor, that you got their back, they will come through for you because you're also thinking about that. You're also having that respect. So for example, let's say most of the times with my team, I will not just bring, hey, here's a project and you got to finish it in 2 days. We have calendars that are like, synced together. I can see where my team is coming in, what projects, like, let's say if my team is full and if the client is coming in and that client needs a certain expertise, and if my expert is not available, I'll let the client know that, hey, listen, there may be a delay in this. So it's about that loyalty. It's about getting each other's back. So loyalty to the client, not only because they are your partner and you are here to support them to succeed, but also to your team, that when you're vested in your team, there's nothing more powerful than that. So if I know that my team is going to be busy or the experts in a certain area cannot come through, then I will let the client know. Or I will check if it is really something urgent. I'll check with the team that, hey, listen, this doesn't happen often. Do you think you could do this in such a short time? And if they say yes, I say yes to the client.
Wow. Yeah, that sounds like there's a lot of more push and pull than you would necessarily get if you had full-time employees. That you have to be really cognizant of their own schedules because they may be contracting out the multiple. I'm assuming they're contracting part-time.
Yes.
Yeah.
So they have contracts with other folks as well. So you're absolutely right. There's definitely a whole lot more push and pull. And at the same time, you get to exercise the negotiation muscles. And I will say that there is no negotiation if there is relationship, because then it's just a dance. You know how you're leading. It may sound like push and pull, and yet if you plan it out, as we were talking about, like preparation, then 20% is the implementation. If you know that, okay, you know what, this is the forecast, this is what's coming in the last quarter, they'll block the time. You can move away from the push and pull. I mean, push and pull will happen, of course. It will happen even if you have employees. Full-time employees can leave like this. So usually you may not have the fallback, or they may get sick, they may go on vacation. So everything has its pros and cons.
Have you had full-time employees?
No.
No. Okay. That's interesting. So now that you've kind of gone through the gig hiring process, I imagine that is drastically different than negotiating salary because they usually come in with their set prices. Is that right?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay. So have you ever tried to negotiate those prices, or you just like you're a good fit, well, I'll take you at your price, or
So, definitely negotiation is there from both the ends. That's a great question, Rafi. So a lot of times what happens is that, especially if you want to bring on a consultant who is at the top of their craft, and if they have that mastery in their craft, and of course you want the best, and yet being a small company, there's only so much cash flow that's happening. Usually, as you're doing projections, okay, you've got 3 clients. You've got 3 clients this quarter. This is the projection of the cash flow, and this is the profit. And now you also got to keep in mind that you're not just paying one contractor a whole lot more money than the other. So to me, working with integrity matters a whole lot as well. So then we just kind of sit down and we create a blanket negotiation. So first thing is that they know that this is a long-term relationship. It's not that they come, they do one project and they're out. Once they have my loyalty and my trust, they know that we do business for life. That whatever number of years that I'm going to be running my business, they will be the primary people who will be getting my clients. So let's say that's one of the things. And then secondly is that we sit down and we negotiate. So for example, I'll give you one example. So one of the persons that I had, phenomenal guy. So we sat down and his price was quite high. And I asked him, okay, let's sit down and break down the customer acquisition part. Tell me, how do you acquire customers? And of course, he wasn't prepared for that time. And then he ended up kind of sharing that to get one customer, sometimes he had to spend anywhere between 10 to 20 hours, ad cost, and the frustration, that energy and all that. So I said, okay, you have that here. Now here I am bringing you the right fit because I know you. I know who you are, the client that will work with you, the project that you'd love to, and these are the additional benefits you're doing. So now tell me, where should we land? And one thing that I've found, Rafi, in negotiation is that when you put all the facts together and when you're showing what is the cost and savings they're getting, they land where I want them to land. Because I'm thinking about them first, because I'm thinking, what is the value they're bringing to me and the value that I respect? Because I'm looking at the time that I'm saving. Like, let's say if I can do some things, but now if I outsource it, then I'm playing to my strengths. I'm finding that joy and passion in my life and not doing the mundane things that I don't want to do. So it's a dance. And when you dance in harmony, it becomes a beautiful way of living and beautiful way of being rather than just kind of thinking that it's negotiating like I'm benefiting or that person is benefiting. It's like how we can benefit together to help the client to succeed.
Wow, that's wonderful. Yeah, I do know a lot of people who are looking to hire virtual assistants and hire virtual teams just because it is a gig economy. And there's so many tips and tricks on how to find the right people, and people struggle to find those. You talked about the building those relationships and just finding someone that they could trust, because I've seen so many stories on Facebook groups where they're like, this VA just stopped after 3 weeks, and I'm like, 2 days from delivering to the client, and I have no choice. I have to refund the client, or things like that happen all the time. And so, yeah, having those right hires and negotiating um, the relationship, for lack of better terms, or building that relationship, I think is important. Um, that's wonderful. Very
And
cool.
I'd like to share, like, just kind of one thing is that have I had some bad experiences? Yes, I've had some really, really bad experiences, and I've learned from that what to include and how to value and cherish the right people. So there have been some people that I mentioned I've been working with from 10, 11 years. And then there have been some people who have just vanished without having that accountability. And will you, no matter like, you may put a ton of things into place and you do all the checklist, 1, 2, 3, 4. People are people. Sometimes things happen, and one of the things to keep in mind is also knowing that we are losing a lot of accountability. Somehow, this wall of social media, it is so awesome. I mean, I love social media, don't get me wrong, because we are able to connect. Like you and I are sitting down here and having this conversation. But at the same token, yes, you can make connections across 5,000 miles and be one world, but at the same token, people hide behind the wall of social media and say that, you know what, I promised this person this and I don't deliver, it's okay. So we are losing those values of integrity and that word. What value does your word hold to you? It's not about doing the right thing. Oh yeah, you know what, I got a better gig, I'm going to just drop that person. It's the meaning that you're giving to your life. It's the meaning to yourself. How valuable is your word to yourself, that commitment? So that also happens.
Wow, that's very true. Yeah, I think there's a huge epidemic of just people, because there's I forget the theory, but it's like the infinite options, where just people like, well, there's just always more people out there, because I can connect to anyone in the world, and it's not. There's a very finite number of options, and let's just take something simple as dating, for example. Not to get off topic here. Um, I was reading an article saying that most people are not going to date without farther than a 35-mile radius. But they go into these apps with the intention of like, there's just going to be hundreds of thousands of people that I could just keep swiping on. But when their pool is literally physically limited, and so when you're working with these gig economies, I mean, yeah, you could find people in Romania or Bangladesh that are incredibly cheap because of the different economies, but there is a finite number of people that have the skills, have the integrity, and have the time and energy to work with you, the availability. And I think coming in with that attitude that I see so many new entrepreneurs go into, where they're just like, I need to find the person at the lowest price, and they get everything done, and just be happy with that, right? Here's all the work you're going to get, like you said, um, they're handing off a lot of their services so that they could free up their own time, and they don't really consider the flip side, what's happening to that person. And so even if you're approaching it with integrity, I see that after a time of like dealing with kind of people like that who don't really care, it could stunt you as well.
Yeah, I mean, initially it was so new to me, and now I'm finding that these people who I've known personally, and they tell you that they'll do something, and then they're just kind of gone. I mean, they're moving around. You see them, they're on social media, they're locally, or they may not be locally. They may be from, like, let's say, like if I'm in North Carolina, they may be New York, or they may be somewhere else. But it's almost like there is no value to the word given. And to me, that is so surprising, because that's something was drilled into me, that if you are making a commitment, come through it. And if you cannot, let the other person know. But now it has just become so normal. I mean, not I coach so many people and I hear that, oh yeah, they promised, but it never followed through. I'm like, just a simple thing. And what if we could do that? That if we came through for people.
Yeah, that's incredible. Well, thank you so much for your time. Do you have any last thoughts or parting words that you would like to kind of reflect on your career and say, you know what, I wish I had known that, you know?
Yes. So I wish, like when I started out at that time, how mentoring and coaching is so important. Having somebody by your side, almost like having your own Jedi, is somebody who has walked the walk, somebody who has seen the pitfalls and blind spots. Because if you have somebody like that by your side, my gosh, you can save so much time and so much heartache, because it's not everything that you can predict. As that's why they say hindsight is always 2020.
That's right. Well, that's incredible. Well, thank you so much for your time. How can people find you?
Well, thank you, Rafi, for having me, first of all. And people can find me on LinkedIn. It's just as my name shows, on my profile. You can find me on my website, which is www.divyaparekh.com, or you can connect with me through email, which is contact@divyaparekh.com. And
All right.
again, so appreciate you. Thank you.